Our next speaker is Dr. David Rosero. Dr. Rosero leads a research program at Iowa State University focused on the development of practical innovations that advance swine sustainable systems. His current research initiatives include maximizing the nutritional value of feed ingredients in swine diets, enhancing animal livability by implementing targeted nutritional interventions, and harnessing computer vision AI technologies to improve production practices and animal welfare. Leveraging his past experience as the technical officer at the Hanner Company, he combines invaluable industry experience with academic pursuits. Today, he's going to talk to us about swine applied innovations, bridging emerging technologies, and practical solutions. Let's welcome Dr. Rosero.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Joanna, for the introduction. I appreciate the invitation by the committee. It's an honor for me to be here discussing with you. I was invited to talk about my research program, and I joined Iowa State almost a year ago. So I've been constructing the program. I want you to illustrate what the vision for the program is, but as we have started constructing a team of great students and a great group of people around, collaborators, and targeting key questions for the industry. That's my goal, is identify what are the challenges, key challenges for the industry. We cannot tackle all, but we can select those that we believe will have very high impact in the industry. So that's my goal today. I hope by the end of today, you go out with a clear vision, clear illustration of what our vision is for our contribution to the industry. And I want to start by, for those that do know me, I'll talk a little bit about me, but especially about the philosophy of my life. These are the three key aspects of my life that I like to keep it in front of me all the time. First, set priorities, always challenging, trying to balance between God, family, and work. But that's a task every day. In the beginning of the day, I remind myself what my priorities are, what's moving my day. The passion for hard work comes after my dad, and then after attending Zamorano University, which has the slang on labor on abyssing, which means work conquers everything. I'll talk a little more about that, and then service to others, and that's what it moved me to Iowa State from Hanor. I wanted to increase my contribution to the industry. I'm honored to be part of the industry. I really appreciate you guys. So that was what it moved me here. A little bit about my background. So I am originally from Ecuador, but I moved to Honduras to pursue my bachelor's degrees in agriculture. It's a fascinating university. You live on campus and you work on campus. So I spent my 4 years there, and I developed my passion for animals in Zamorano. I came to the U.S. first to work as a farm employee into a sow farm. So I worked there for 2 years with a Smithfield company. But then I started to pursue my graduate education. I went to NC State to pursue my master's and PhD in nutrition. I was very attracted to the statistical program as well, so I have a minor there. And then through the work and research with NC State and Hanor Company, I joined the Hanor Company back in 2014, so almost 10 years ago, where I started working as a nutritionist, but then I later took the charge of technical officer, so overseeing nutrition and the technologies of the company. I like to acknowledge great mentors in my life. At the beginning of my career, these were great mentors: Dr. Jack Odell, Dr. Eric Van Houten, my mentor, my main mentor, and Dr. Dean Boyd. They have been crucial into the early stages of my career. They continue to be, but now I appreciate being surrounded with other mentors. So that's another of the great things Iowa State has offered to me. Now, moving into my program, same as I talk about the philosophy of my life, I like to talk about the philosophy of my research program, in which we are intended to develop innovative solutions, but with the heart of scientific understanding of this, and then conducting sound research But then at the end of the day, because of my background, bring some apply innovative solutions. So I'd like to illustrate some of the examples of the work we're doing today, and it will be related to these three aspects of the philosophy. Now, as an industry, and then today and yesterday, we also discussed some of these challenges we had. There's many challenges that relate to sustainability, relate to the market. We have pressure to the access of resources, access to water, but also the market is challenging us, right? Into reduce use of antibiotics. They are demanding higher quality, but yet too we have a pressure for higher feed prices and lower revenues into our side. So that's a big challenge for the industry. Animal welfare is big too. We can choose any of these challenges. We like to focus on those three key challenges that I'm listing here, especially the post-weaning mortality, morbidity, the optimal access to welfare resources through the life of the pig, and then the sow and the pig losses during farrowing. I wish we can do more, but these are the areas where we decided to focus our efforts. We believe this is one of the, these bring to the industry greatest opportunities. I'll talk more about this and how we're trying to tackle each of these questions. No, so this is a list of some of the questions we have into our lab and some of the projects we are currently working. And I grouped those questions and projects into two buckets. One into what I call it welfare resources that involve access to nutrients, access to water, access to space. Specifically, we are investigating a lot more about the feed ingredient and nutrients. So questions like how much if soybean meal becomes more available and priced very nicely into our least cost formulation, how high can we feed that to the pigs in a safe manner? Also, and yesterday we participated in a great discussion about the net energy value of soybean meal, or productive net energy value. That's a question to us, but we also want to compare that value in a commercial versus university setting, thinking about the difference in maybe the health pressure pigs might have it into the field, and that soybean meal might have a role there. So that's another of the projects we're working on. I have great interest in working more with fiber. I have seen data, but we also have worked with fiber, especially in gestating sows and tackling sow mortality. This seems to be important. But one of the key areas here is that I don't think we have a great handle on how we determine fiber into our ingredients. We're still working with NDF values, neutral detergent fiber values. I think we have to move to total dietary fiber values that will bring us to an understanding on solubility and solubility of the fiber. So that's work. We are collaborating with Dr. Amy Petrie, great work she's doing in her lab. Very honored to work with her in this area. And then lastly, this is on this bucket, is we're doing a field evaluation on the access to welfare resources. Our question with Dr. Anna Johnson has been into, as pigs have increased the growth rate, and we keep our pigs in the same facilities as 15, 20 years ago, is that having an impact on the welfare of the pigs? So Emma, Alexa here, they have done a tremendous job going into the field and evaluating into the field, take measurements on the weight of the pigs, counting of the pigs, the space, access for space, access to feed, access to water. So I expect great resources, great results out of that study. Now, as we talk about innovative tools, another of the buckets that I like to bring forward for the industry is the smart farming tools. And I just came from another session on labor efficiency here. Great talks about what is coming to our hands. There's a couple questions we have. One is, I like to bridge the development and the implementation. So I have something about that too. But we ourselves want to develop tools that help us as researchers, but help you as producers. And the key questions here will be the access to feed and water right after weaning. So there's development we're doing there too. Monitoring growth performance daily for the pigs, which then we can apply into big data tools like Guillermo was showing, but more for the production side, more for a key opportunity I see is the way we sell pigs, we market pigs. If we do it in a more precise way, my experience will tell me that there's anywhere from $2 to $5 per pig opportunity if I can be accurate and I can be precise. Together with those questions, we have to bring talented students into our team. So this is a group of 2 PhD students, a master's student that started, and we're fortunate to have great undergraduate help too, and a research assistant. Bimala, she joined our lab early this year. She's pursuing a PhD in bioinformatics and computational biology, so you can see where she can fit into the development of innovative tools. She's in charge and leading the development of the computer vision technologies. Gustavo Lima is pursuing his doctorate in nutrition, but with emphasis in statistics and economical modeling. He's working with feed ingredients, especially soybean meal. He can get very deep into this, and he brings a really great experience from the field. He comes from Brazil, but working 10 plus years. He has a master's in Brazil, so very fortunate to have him here in our team. Now Nathan, he just joined our lab here in the summer. I got to know Nathan in my class last year. I teach 425 swine management systems class, and I picked his interest on data analytics. And so I approached Nathan, asked about what his plans were, and I knew the passion was for data analytics and for pigs. So we asked if we can combine the two and create a master's program. So grateful to have Nathan. And now Stephanie, she's been helping the team as an undergrad a research assistant for the whole team from this summer. Very fortunate to count with this very talented group of people, which will move forward the projects we have. So just to give you a couple of examples of the projects we're doing, you can understand that these are on development. We just started. We had the first student arriving on January, but we had the things going. So one of the first questions Gustavo had, and this is in collaboration with Dr. Nick Gabler, is how much soybean meal can we feed to grow finished pigs? So in a world that we heard there's going to be a lot more soybean meal because of the crushing of soybeans and maybe more affordable. Can we go beyond 40, 50% and feed that pig safely? This is work that Dr. Gabler and Dr. Greiner did in 2022. And so here's some of the information for the diets. First diet, first phase, 4 phases. So first phase, the range of soybean meal went from 48 to 26%, 48 being the highest. And in your last phase, when pigs reach 105 kilograms body weight, the range was from 13 to 29% soybean meal, so high. So here is a summary of the results they saw, and I don't know if you can see it in the back. It's a small numbers, apologize, but the end weight was about 120 kilograms, but there wasn't any significant difference in that weight. So any of those levels of soybean meal were fed to pigs and without an impact in performance. So Gustavo came and he asked how much higher can we feed? Can we go beyond the 48%? And these will be values that you might only see in the university setting, but that's what you have to do in the university setting, to provide information to you as producers in a world that if you can feed beyond 48%, how will you formulate those diets? So 4 phases again, and what Gustavo did here is to formulate diets from 26%, and very comparable to the first study, but he went to 75% soybean meal. So that's pretty high. That's into the first phase of the pig. And into the last phase, we are into a second phase, third phase. By the end of September, we'll have finished the project, and pigs will be consuming 42% at the highest level. So it's ongoing basis, but Gustavo is one of those students that like to keep things going and moving fast. So he had a summary for the first phase. So this is just preliminary data that I'm showing, but just to illustrate the work he's doing. In the first phase, from 22 kilograms to a 47 kilogram pig, there was a tendency to be the body weight to be reduced, mainly driven by a significant linear impact on the feed intake of the pig, but also an improvement in the caloric efficiency as the levels went to 75% in this case. So it wasn't I guess the decrease or reduction in performance. It wasn't as drastic as I was anticipating with 75% soybean meal. We use, relative to the discussion we had yesterday on the net energy value of soybean meal, we still use NRC value, which is about 78% of the energy of corn in this study. Just to give you a little more background, some of the data we're seeing. We'll continue to analyze the data. We weigh pigs on Monday, so pretty sure maybe by early next week he'll have a quick summary of the second phase. So this is ongoing. And ultimately what he wants to develop is regression and broke line analysis for each of these phases to guide you as producers. If I do see a response in feed intake or body weight, where's my break point, right? What's my maximum value that I can do? So this is an example on the daily weight gain on the first phase, and where he is comparing, this is very small, apologize, it's only intended to illustrate, but he is comparing different regression lines and broke line analyses, finding a break point here. So that's more to come into this project. I like to then transition to smart tools and smart farming tools. This is the way that I see some of these tools addressing challenges we just discussed, right? So I'm just going to list here challenges relative to sustainability, animal welfare, environmental impact, animal health, qualified labor, all of those challenges we're facing as producers. But I also listed technologies that we are having available to us today. And this matrix is for me just to illustrate how do I see each of these technologies playing a role for those challenges, right? You can take a different look at it. You can evaluate differently, but I think maybe that's a place to start. If I have a challenge, do I recognize a technology that will help me to address that challenge? But then more importantly is if I do recognize the technology, how do I evaluate? So I take it two components. What is the technology evaluation? And the second aspect, and more importantly, is the technology adoption, right, side, which if I'm going to adopt a technology, I think I need to ask myself if that's going to improve my revenue. So in the case of, I mentioned marketing, if I can make $2 or $5 more per pig, it's improving my revenue. Or is that going to decrease my costs? Can I save some labor because I have a technology that I can access to? Ultimately, in my system, I want to improve the profitability, right? But the evaluation is critical as well, and is if I recognize a technology like a computer vision, is that computer vision accurate in the way that I expect? So is estimating the body weight of the pigs accurately for me? Is reliable if I install that camera into my system, meaning that if I expect a daily weight measurement for every camera, and if I have it for a cycle of pigs, can I get that 95% of the times, right? That's my reliability. And then if I have in my checkbox the two, can I go and implement the technology through my system? When I was at Hanor, we were debating all the time about technologies. We had 300 plus sites into Iowa alone. And installing cameras or installing sensors in beans, et cetera, it's a big decision, right? So if I do it, I need to have confidence in these three key aspects. So that's a question I will challenge you, maybe offer you a matrix like this to evaluate. That's something we want to do at Iowa State too, and offer that to you, offer to developers, so then it becomes easier in the adoption side for the producer. So here's an example. I'm just taking data from my times at Hanor on how we'll take a look to technologies. And this was very early on into the development of a smart camera. This is a peak vision camera. There's a lot more today. But it's just a way to illustrate how will you evaluate this technology. So the three aspects that I will do is the accuracy, reliability, and implementation of the system. We wait, I think this is for 2 years of data. This is into our research barn where we compare cameras and compare the pens where we had weights to. And by the end of the development or testing, we had a more than 97% accuracy, which for us, it was acceptable. And you have to decide yourself if that's going to be the case, right? You expect 99%, and how long does it take you there? Now, for reliability, we had at the beginning more issues. As you can imagine, you install a camera. The first cycle, you might have 98, 99% reliability, meaning that you have most of the data capture as you expected. But as the cycles go on, you're going to have more problems with electronics, with network, with the cleaning of the camera itself. So you have to have a plan of maintaining the cameras to make sure you can achieve most of the times more than 98%, right? The implementation for this technology is where we are far away, because the price is not there yet unless you just take a few cameras to sample your barn too. And if you're going to install cameras in 300+ sites, do you need to have a really good plan to maintain, replace cameras, clean cameras, and who is going to do that, right? So for a research testing to evaluate my system maybe on an ongoing basis, we accepted the technology to be there, but to implement commercially, no there yet. But just as an example of what maybe as producers we can do to evaluate our technologies. Now, I talk about the development of some of these technologies. So here's Vimala, and she's leading our efforts to develop a computer vision to understand the post-weaning pig behavior. She's interested in measuring feeding and drinking behavior in post-weaning pigs. So here, let me get through. Yeah, I have that right. So this is a very short summary of the whole effort that takes in the development. This is the first time I took it. So she's a lot more knowledgeable than I am in this area. But I think it's what it takes for you to have a tool, right? If you want to have a research tool to understand more, for our case, more of what is happening post-weaning, we are recording videos of the first 3 days post-weaning. We're processing the videos right now. We are in the phase of the deep learning model for the object detection. So she's getting very close to detect the pig. Now, once you have the detection pig, then you can do an object track and analyzing the behavior, which will be feeding and drinking behavior. That's what we are interested, and I will tell you why. And then our purpose is to feed that information to a machine learning algorithm to predict the behavior of the fall behind pigs. That's the ultimate goal, is if we can recognize early on fall behind pigs, I think we can alert employees, we can understand more about nutritional interventions that can help address that specific question. And then the program or the model will be ready to do a beta testing into a field condition. So I talked to you about the complexity of developing these tools. This is just a couple of examples on trying to label, put the right label into the pig that is getting to the feeder and or getting into the drinker, and label as a pig standing, pig eating, pig drinking. And there's things like augmentation that you can do to feed more information to the deep learning model, as I understand it, just to get closer and faster to that development, right? So that's something ongoing. And the reason on why is because we're interested into the early feed intake of that pig. So this is work. We're collaborating with Dr. Nick Gabler. We have collected a series of feed intake data by pen during the first week especially. This looks very messy, but it's data on feed intake by pen during the first 7 days on multiple trials. So every line will be data for a pen. We are adding more data, and what we want to do is to understand how this early feed intake is a predictor of the body weight at day 42 for the pigs. So that's one of the main reasons, and this is why this is taking that data, grouping the data into low and high feed intake pigs. The high feed intake pigs being in a black color, and the low feed intake pigs being in a red. And you can see that this becomes, the early feed intake becomes an end of the nursery good predictor of performance. For average daily gain and for feed intake, in this graph below is showing each of the days how that feed intake is being affected through the period of the nursery. So that's our interest into understanding feed intake on the first 3 days and applying a computer vision technology. Now I'll move into another of the smart farming tools that we are working, and it's the digital. It involves the digital transformation. I'm not going to go through every of these steps because Guillermo gave a really good example of what that means, bringing the data into a cloud, integrating. But the most important piece here is how you activate the data, right? Right now, I think it's our goal from the faculty, from the university, is to put in the students' hands in training them how to use these new technologies that are becoming more available to understand the data that's being integrated. So Nathan came with the passion for data analytics and the passion for pigs. And so some of the questions that we're working are around the accurate marketing and sales of pigs. I believe there's 3 key components to be accurate into this area, and I need to time right the first sale of the pigs. I need to, because that's going to drive my subsequent sellings, but I need to also be precise in selecting the pigs that I need, right? So if I am able to track how pigs grow over time, you might not see at the back, it's small again, but the computer, the algorithm, maybe the camera can tell me how pigs are growing and how that variation is changing over time. Why is that important? It's because if I can do an accurate marketing process, I can avoid something like this. So this is a producer's data of 2022. What I'm showing here is only the first cut average weight pigs. The target for the producer is 285. So I want to sell my first cut of pigs at 285 pounds. I got very accurate at 287, and that's using traditional methods, right? I want to understand how pigs grow, so I apply growth curves. I apply equations and estimations, and I do get very accurate, but I only get 62% of the pigs within 10 pounds of that target, meaning I'm not precise into the timing of that first cut. And that's what I meant when I said that there's about $2 to $5 per pig opportunity in the right process of marketing. That's where Nathan is having a passion. He started working on, this is an example of what I meant with the big opportunity we have and maybe the application of technologies. This is in collaboration with Pig Vision company, where one of the barns here shown into the reddish color, barn 1 follow a standard marketing protocol, which was guided by growth curves and feed curves. So again, accurate but not precise. And then we challenged that with a barn 2 that was guided by the computer vision and AI. So the system will tell how pigs are growing over time, and when to market the first cut of pigs, and when to market the subsequent pigs. Now, I'm comparing these 3 bars that are the times and the percentage of pigs that I sold my pigs from the standard procedure, and the 4 barns in the darker color are what the camera and the AI will say the pigs need to go. Now, comparing here in the table, the weights are very similar. For the standard protocol, it was about 290 pounds versus 289 pounds. So no gains into the body weight of the pigs, but notice that I save a week. So there's 6 days less on days on feed for this group of pigs. What that meant is, if I look into the distribution of those carcasses, the standard protocol will be a lot more variable than my computer vision and AI. Computer vision and the right timing means I want most of my pigs in the right weight ranges, right? Because that's what's gonna optimize the price that I get paid by the plant processor, right? If I go too high or too low in my weights when I sell my pigs, there's great penalties that I can avoid if I do a more accurate and precise marketing protocol. Now, how we measure, there wasn't changes in the body weight, but the variation was reduced by 2.3% in this case when I compared the two. So that's the opportunity I'm talking about. You're just optimizing the number of pigs that go into the right ranges of weights as an example of the application. Nathan, he started with us last semester as a Science with Practice program, and he started developing some of this modeling. So he developed a growth curve, and along with that growth curve, he developed a pig marketing tool. And so here's just an example of titrating. What he did is, if I take my pigs at 140 to 180 days, right? And I have changing conditions in my market. So I have feed costs that are higher or lower, and my pig price that can maybe higher and lower. That was given to producers that then they can change those factors. So this is very early on too, but it's a very nice example for him and for his Science with Practice project. He got an award for most impact to the community when he presented this project at the university. So this is the area where he will be working and expanding, so expect a lot more from Nathan on this area. And last topic I want to talk is very close to my heart, is the area where I can play with sows and work with sows, but also bring to the industry a nutritional intervention that I think it will have a lot of value. But there's a lot of work we have to do in this area. I just want to highlight some of the value that dietary fiber has in the different phases of the sow. Just anywhere from gestation, peripartum lactation, improving the satiety, reducing inflammation, reducing constipation, which has been proven, improving the colostrum production, improving the feed intake. So I think there's benefits. Unfortunately, in the US, I think we don't have as much access to fibrous ingredients for sows as other countries like Europe. And two, we need a better understanding of those components. So here is a literature review of 10 studies. It was provided by Dr. Pete Wilco to us. And it's just to illustrate the difference between a control on those studies that had 300 grams of total dietary fiber as a measure of the fiber, and a high fiber, which was more than 500 grams per day. And this is during gestation, calculated in a grams per day basis. And so in the review, what he noticed is that there's an improvement in the number of pigs weaned and the leader weight gain and the feed intake. So some of those key aspects is what we want to bring it to our type of diets to understand more about ingredients and how to get there. But it's not only the level of total dietary fiber, it's also the composition of that fiber. And it's, in this case, it's showing the response to increasing levels of soluble fiber from 60 to 90, meaning that if you go close to 70, close to 76 or above, close to 70 grams per day of soluble fiber, there will be a response to number of pigs weaned and the leader weight gain. So that's encouraging information we're taking, and we took in our conversations that encouraged us to try it into the field and specifically targeting sow mortality. So what we did here is to take a sow farm that was a high mortality farm. It was highly productive, but also high mortality. And we want to challenge ourselves with our levels. We believe we had high levels of total dietary fiber because of our access to wheat millings in that area. So we were about 13, 14% total dietary fiber with those 30% wheat millings. But because you have to challenge yourself sometimes, we went to 18 in a first phase, but then push farther to a more than 30% total dietary fiber. And to get there, we had to do 20% wheat millings and 40% soybean hulls, because we wanted the right level of fiber, but also the type of fiber. And the soluble fiber in this case will be bringing from the soy hulls, right? We don't have much access to soluble fibers, but the one that can give you some will be soy hulls if you want to get there. We use 610 sows. We did this in the field, and again, a high mortality sow farm. So this is what it encouraged me to continue this work and to pursue more in this area. When we measure mortality, that's the area we were more interested about. We saw a tendency to reduce the mortality relative to the number of sows that we placed in the trial when we fed the high fiber diet. Now, specifically, and this is a pen gestation farm, we saw that the mortality was mainly driven by the lameness reduction into that farm. But relative to the discussion we're having in the industry to prolapses, there was a numerical reduction as well. So not as drastic as we wanted to see. It's more of the impact in lameness to the sows, but very encouraging data. Now, if you go by regions, it will be very difficult for us to get there, right? And that's what we need to understand our ingredients. Just to give you an example here, a corn soy diet, it will be about 8% total dietary fiber. So if you put in a grams per day basis, that will only provide about 180, no more than 200 grams per day, right? And when we compare to European data, they will be feeding about 450 to 500 grams per day. Now, you might say you have access to DDGs, and you can put that into your station diet. You might get to a 10%, a little more, on total dietary fiber, and that doesn't get you any closer to the 450 grams per day, right? Compared to a European diet. So if we compare these by different regions and different diets, these are Brazilian diets, Spain, UK, Thailand, and US. This is just to give you an example of where we are in the US relative to Europe specifically, right? If we want to achieve 450 grams per day, we're very far from it too. And especially if we go and look the soluble fiber, which we said you might want to be between 60 and 70 grams per day. We are half there, right? Because we don't have the right resources. Now, I believe these are the research needs. I mentioned to you earlier, these are some of the work we're already doing, especially into characterizing the fiber into the US ingredients. So that's great work we're doing with Dr. Petrie. But then we need to understand what's the contribution of those fibrous ingredients to the energy value for the sows specifically, which I don't think we have a good handle of. What's the functional value of that dietary fiber? But then too is as we bring that fiber, imagine you have to do 40% soy hulls into your diet. That's going to change the dynamics on the feed logistics, right? Is you have to accommodate a lot more volume because it's less dense into the feed meal. Your diets are going to change the density if you don't pellet. So some of those will be practical constraints, but if we see the value of the fiber in reducing specifically mortality, and we heard from Steve this morning that mortality is one of the key limitations into our industry and challenges. So I think the value is there, the needs are there. That's where our group is working on. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge a group of people that in this first year, I have started to collaborate. They have been very open to establish this conversation and started these projects with us. Dr. Amy Petrie, Nick Gabler, Dr. Greiner have been a great nutrition group here at Iowa State. And now into the computer vision, Juan Estibil, Santosh Pandey. Anna Johnson is bringing a great component into the animal behavior. So I'm very delighted to have here and collaborating. And then a group from the Vet Med, Dr. Daniel Linares, Gustavo Silva. Now we have Dr. Edison Magajales now joining our department. So With that, like to appreciate your time. Thank you for staying to the end. It's the last session. I'm honored to be here in Iowa State, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Any questions for Dr. Rosero?
Is Nathan's pig marketing tool, is that available to producers?
No yet. We want to make it available. That's the goal. And we'll make it available through IPIC. There's great dynamics there, so you can access to it.
Sounds good, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, David, for a really nice talk. I was most curious, linking to your Sal, fiber and mortality. Is there more of a shift over time? It seems like whenever I listen to nutritionists, it's average daily gain, average daily feed intake, feed conversion. But is there any more emphasis on mortality in the grow finish phase for nutritionists to optimize diets for? Or do you think we should see more? I know Nick did some work in terms of feeding sick pigs. But,
Yeah, certainly it's an area where there's a lot of interest, right? I think it's the settings we have to understand mortality relative to nutrition are no ideal. You need large data sets and in a controlled way. We try to do something like that in the sow, and also we have to push the limits. And if you see the example I provided, we compare 13% to 30%, which is huge, and you don't see those type of diets being compared. But I think it's needed if you want to see something like mortality. So probably you have to go beyond what you know. And then two, you have to have the right setting. So you have to have a sound number of experimental units that can answer mortality questions. But to your point, yes, that's of our interest as nutritionists. If I seen a couple of examples, silanase will be another one where there was field experience. We also tried to measure into the field, into the right conditions, but targeting our metric to be mortality.
Thanks for your great presentation. I'm really curious, the last field sow trial you did, with a large number of sows and saw the reduction in mortality with lameness. They probably didn't measure behavior, but any observations in terms of satiety or reduced aggression or activity that would have been, related to the reduction in lameness?
Yep, that's what I will assume with fiber, John, especially being a pen gestation, and we didn't measure, we couldn't. That's our purpose of starting to develop some of the computer vision technologies. It will get us there, but some of the impressions in the field where the pigs, sows were more calm after eating. I think that reduced locomotion, that reduced walking and behavior issues probably.
Very good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.